Hello.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And Mauricio.
I just get randomly booted off of this Microsoft stuff. I mean, all of a sudden I'm just not on it anymore. All right, so we're getting close to beginning. We have a really ambitious agenda today. We've got a lot going on. We have enough to do that I think I talked to Reva. I think one of the issues, we barely have a quorum, and I don't think we have one quite yet. I think Jane, Elijah, someone was going to be a little late.
Liza Jane, yep, she'll be about 15 minutes late.
Kind of get rolling here, and we were going to unfortunately dispense with the updates on what everybody's doing, and that's partly because everybody else is doing something really cool and not here, and so we'll let them tell us when they get back. So however, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the meeting, but before we do that, I do have one important announcement, and I'm not, oh, there she is, and Andrea is here. We have filled the recreation post that was vacated, and we're extremely fortunate to have landed Andrea Hansen, who many of you know her from her work at ODF&W, and now she's with the Parks Department. And we had a great meeting with her earlier on. She has some really great ideas, and really excited to have her. She's going to be able to give us a lot of good insight. So Andrea, welcome to the committee, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. It's good to see so many old friends. Hello again. I'm glad we'll still be able to work together.
Andrea, why don't you take a minute and just kind of update everybody on where you were and where you are and what your new role is,
Sure.
and you know what's what.
Sure, no problem. Andrea Hansen, for those who I haven't met, I worked for ODFW for almost 18 years, mainly in the conservation program. I was the conservation strategy coordinator for about 13 years, and then I was the conservation policy coordinator for a couple years. I moved to the governor's office for a little bit, and then now I work for Oregon Parks. I'm the Central Operations Resource Manager, so I help manage the Natural Resources Program and the Cultural Resources Program. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we are too. We're really happy.
Thank you.
I think you really add a lot to the committee. So welcome, Andrea. So Reva, we wanted to acknowledge people from the public. I'm not sure we have too many right now. We got some. Reva, you want to do that?
Yeah, Chair Winter, so it looks like we have Paul Sheldon. Thank you for joining us today, Paul. And I think that is the only member of the public I'm seeing, unless I hope I didn't miss anybody. Okay. But thank you, Paul, for joining.
All right, well, great. So we're going to just jump into this, and oh, no, let's approve the minutes and get that out of the way. Oh, we might not have a quorum for that yet. Well, there's Liza Jane.
I think we need to wait until Jane Hartline joins us.
Okay, so we'll just put that on the back burner. So, but what we've got going today, some really exciting things, and why we need to move along is we have an opportunity to review some wildlife crossing projects. And as you all know, we had $5 million to distribute. There's quite a few strings attached to that. And so we have had to be very selective in who we could offer this to. And there's a time limit, so we don't want to fool around with it. We want to get things done so they can get the work done on the ground. And just to bring everybody's memory up to date, if you recall, we allocated $500,000 of this to the Frog Crossing project early on. And that has turned out to be a great thing for us to have done because that's a great project. It fit the criteria that we needed to spend this money. So that was a really great thing. We've looked around through the help quite a bit of Rachel Wheat, who's going to present to us here in a sec, for projects that would fit our criteria. And we're going to hear about those today. I hope you all had a chance to review them, because ultimately our plan is to go ahead and approve if we feel they're appropriate, approve these projects. And that's why we're hoping we get a quorum here before too long. So to start with, to get the ball rolling on this, we've asked Rachel Wheat to talk to us about the projects, and also just to give us a little background on herself and the context that she's presenting to us. So Rachel, are you ready to give us a little chat about what we're doing today and your role in it?
Yeah, sure thing.
Great.
So thank you all for the opportunity to present on some background information here. My name is Rachel Wheat. I am the Wildlife Connectivity Coordinator with ODFW. I'm housed in our Wildlife Diversity Program. And my role within the state is to coordinate efforts statewide to identify and protect and improve habitat that's critical for facilitating wildlife movement. So that's across all of our wildlife species, large-bodied, small-bodied, and that obviously intersects with a lot of different arenas, everything from energy development to resource extraction to residential and commercial development to, of course, transportation mitigation. So I'm going to be speaking a little bit today about the lottery bond revenue that was allocated for wildlife passage work specifically via the OCRF. So this came out of a bill that was introduced during the 2023 state legislative session. There was actually a House bill that was introduced originally called House Bill 2999 that would have allocated $5 million in general fund to ODFW for this purpose. That bill did not make it through Ways and Means, but we actually did end up getting that funding wrapped up in the end of season omnibus bill. So this was House Bill 5030 in the 2023 legislative session that set aside $5 million in lottery bonds to be distributed to the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. So that lottery bond sale was actually just finalized this morning. So those funds will be available to start making use within the next week or so. Again, that money is deposited in the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, and the legislative intent here is for wildlife passage infrastructure to support wildlife mobility and habitat connectivity within priority corridors. And the original House Bill, House Bill 2999, specifies that those priority corridors are the areas that were identified in the Oregon Connectivity Assessment and Mapping Project. So those are our state's priority wildlife connectivity areas. As Carl noted, there are some pretty strict requirements for the use of these funds. So these funds have to be used to construct or significantly improve wildlife passage infrastructure. They have to go towards development of a capitalizable asset. So it has to be a physical structure on the ground. Unfortunately, that means that we can't use these funds for things like fencing removal projects or habitat restoration efforts that would significantly improve wildlife passage, but don't result in the construction of physical infrastructure. No indirect charges are allowed within the grantees program. That can obviously be limiting for the applicants that may want to make use of these funds. There's also a very strict 36-month time window on this lottery bond revenue. So the clock starts ticking down starting today. Since the sale was finalized today, we have 36 months from today for these funds to be spent. The caveat there is that if this is a larger project with a larger budget that has funds from other sources, the project can continue beyond that 36-month timeline, but the lottery bond revenue must be spent within those 36 months. And the other limitation here for us, especially in Oregon, where we haven't advanced a lot of wildlife passage infrastructure projects to a phase in which they're ready for construction is that these funds cannot be used to support standalone design efforts, engineering efforts. They also can't be used to support research, monitoring, or maintenance of crossing structures. So in a lot of situations, we've identified locations where wildlife loss due to vehicle strikes is a concern for many species, but we haven't advanced to the point where we have, say, conceptual designs for a structure or engineering designs for a structure, and we need to get to that point first prior to being ready for construction. And that, added to that 36-month time restriction, really makes this difficult to kind of fulfill some of those requirements.
Andrea, if you don't, or Rachel, I'm sorry. I do have a question about that.
Sure.
So 3 years from today, is when it says no standalone design, would it be if it was a design for a structure that was going to be built before the end of the time, would that still work?
That would work, but we would have to prove that we have the funding necessary to complete construction.
So that would mean all the other funding sources. But if there was, say, a standalone project, I'm just trying to picture this, where the total cost, let's say, was $1 million, including design and implementation, and it could be done by 3 years from today, then that would work. We could
Yes.
we could fund that design.
Yes. So we can fund design as long as it's part of a project that will be constructed. So either using the lottery bond revenue itself or using external funding sources that have already been secured.
Okay, that is, I think, very helpful. And maybe for folks, there may be situations like that where they just need a little more info that we might be able to help them with that. I'm thinking of some in particular that might potentially be done. And so anyway, thank you. I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, Rachel, this is Liza Jane. I do. Under capitalizable asset, the re-veg part of these projects, does that have to be sorted out, or is that considered okay?
I think as part of a construction effort of physical infrastructure, that would be allowable, but not as its own separate project, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so if that's all that's going to happen, that doesn't fit.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So ODFW has some goals for these funds. Now, first and foremost, obviously, our primary goal here is to identify and fund projects that meet those very strict lottery bond revenue criteria. We need to get these funds spent. That's goal number one. Goal number two is obviously to meet the legislative intent of these funds, which means implementing projects that are within or directly adjacent to our priority wildlife connectivity areas. But then, in a best case scenario, if we can identify a diversity of projects, ODFW would also like to focus on improving wildlife passage for a diversity of taxa and, if possible, to emphasize non-game or smaller bodied species. So there are really no other funding sources available that can improve wildlife passage on roadways for small bodied species. Most of the funding that is available right now at the federal level is specific to improvement of motorist safety. That's also true at the state level. So these are collisions with larger bodied wildlife like deer and elk, which of course is critically important. We're not going to negate the importance of those, but we really don't have any other funding sources available to address these smaller bodied or non-game species. So if we are fortunate enough to identify a suite of projects to be able to fund, we would like to emphasize non-game or smaller bodied species where possible. And fortunately, we actually already made use of some of these funds to do just that. We were allowed to advance funds for the Polensky Wildlife Underpass, which Carl also mentioned. So the OCRF approved $495,000 from this lottery bond revenue in April of 2024. ODFW provided advance payment for those funds so that we can complete the project. Construction was completed in late fall of 2024, and we actually just finished our monitoring of our first frog migration season at that site. And we're very gratified to see that even though there was a tremendous amount of site disturbance as construction was just finished, and this is a brand new structure on the landscape and relatively long for amphibians, there's, passing under 4 lanes of traffic, we still had a tremendous amount of use here in the first season. So we had more than 300 observations of red-legged frogs using that underpass, which is tremendous. We had both males and females. We had juvenile, subadults, and adults moving both uphill and downhill, downhill to the breeding wetlands and then back uphill into the Tualatin Mountains. We also recorded complete passage of a number of other species, including things like dun salamander, northwest salamander, striped skunk, common garter snake, and Pacific tree frog. So lots of data that we're still sorting through, but very, very happy to see that even in its first season that we're seeing tremendous amount of frog movement through this structure. So it is working as intended, and this was a very good investment that we were very grateful for from the OCRF.
Rachel, that is great, great news. And thank you so much I knew they were monitoring it, but I didn't know that they had that's just great. That's very gratifying. Thank you for forwarding that information.
Yeah, we're planning on doing a little end of season wrap up, and that information should go out in the next week or two, just kind of summarizing what we found from this first season. But we were very happy to see the number of frogs that we did.
Rachel, did they still have the bucket brigade? Are there frogs still going over the road too?
So that's at the Harborton site, which is about a mile and a half or 2 miles closer to Portland. And I'm not sure what their season is like for the bucket brigade. I know they were out there. The Harborton Frog Shuttle effort was definitely doing it again this season. I think their season ends the end of March. So I'm not sure that they're still bucketing frogs.
Okay, I thought it was the same place. Okay, thank you.
Very close by.
That's the one that Jane is involved in, and that's just up the road a bit. I think they're in the process of looking at a crossing there as well, and we'll see where that goes.
Well, Rachel, this is Mark. Dumb question. Has there ever been any research on whether frogs or these kind of species have a memory and go back to the same spot every year because they got safely across and teach it to their young? Is there any kind of research on any of that?
There's no research available there. I think there has been some indication that, like with other crossing structures with large body wildlife, use tends to increase over time. So as the structure has been there longer on the landscape, maybe it's easier for animals to find it. Maybe individual animals do remember the location. We are starting to work with Portland State University. There's a couple master's students there that want to start doing some research at this site, and they might put tracking devices on individual frogs and try to follow their movement over time. So we might start to be able to get a sense of whether or not that happens with frogs.
Yeah. Okay.
My guess is that there's probably not inherited like memory. They're probably not teaching their offspring since they're born in the pond and grow up without parental care, but they may find it and reuse it year after year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I bet they leave a scent trail too. Something's going to smell them. The other ones smell them and follow them. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Well, we're super pleased about Polensky and really looking forward to monitoring it for the next few years to see what happens there. But either way, we built it and they did come. So that's great. We always love that.
It would be great to get, I don't know if there's a plan to get that out there, to publicize that as a win. I think that is a worthwhile thing to do.
For sure. Okay, so next steps for this lottery bond revenue. There's the 2 projects that you're going to hear about later in this meeting that we're recommending advanced for funding. But even if the committee chooses to approve funding for both of those projects, there's still approximately $3.8 million in funding available that needs to get spent down in the next 36 months. So we are currently working on sending out a second request for letters of information. We're going to try to push for a broader distribution of that information. I believe the last request for letters of interest went out. It was right before the holidays started. I think folks were pretty busy and wrapped up in things, so I think that got missed. We did try to push it to the federal agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Forest Service, as well as the Oregon Habitat Connectivity Consortium and some other organizations. But this time around, we're going to target specifically counties and municipalities. So there's lots of, city and county departments of transportation that may have local projects that could make use of these funds for sort of smaller scale wildlife passage infrastructure within city or county boundaries. So we're going to be targeting those groups specifically to see if we can make use of those funds. We're also going to start to brainstorm other opportunities for making use of this funding. So looking at applications for the PFA funds or fish passage projects that are slated to go in to try to see if there's opportunities where contributing funding from the wildlife passage lottery bond revenue could result in improvements for wildlife passage in an existing project that's like shovel ready to hit the ground, ready to go, or at least is further along in the developmental process than a lot of the wildlife specific passage projects that we have. We've also started to think through options for ODFW to potentially execute some projects ourselves. So this wouldn't necessarily be specific to an underpass or an overpass, but maybe something like an arboreal bridge that would allow some of our arboreal wildlife to pass over roadways. That's maybe a little bit less tricky to design and engineer and implement in that shorter time frame. And then finally, we're going to keep an eye on some of the applicants from this previous round that met some but not all of the criteria for this lottery bond revenue. So again, there are some projects that applied or that sent letters of interest during this previous round that were very promising, that I think are good projects that meet a lot of those criteria for the lottery bond revenue, but just aren't quite there yet. So maybe they haven't completed their engineering designs, or maybe they have secured some but not all of the funding they would need available. And so we're going to definitely keep an eye on those projects, and if they advance to the point where they would meet all the funding criteria and just need the lottery bond revenue to push them to a point where they could actually construct, we would request a full proposal from them at that point.
Rachel, where does the Subtle Lake project fall in all that?
So Subtle Lake is unfortunately, they are just at the level of conceptual design right now. They have fundraised about $1 million of match, non-federal match, and they intend to apply for the Wildlife Crossing pilot program, that federal program, if and when that funding announcement opens up again this year. So the total need for engineering design for those 4 overpass structures that they've targeted is between $4 and $4.5 million. And that would just be for engineering design, so that wouldn't be construction. So even if they were at a point where they had the 4 structures or even one of the 4 structures totally designed and ready to break ground, they would need to secure a substantial amount in construction funds for us to be able to make up that gap with that 3.8 million.
Yeah, so yeah, we definitely need to keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, that's one of the tricky projects that, since we have to construct something, we can't use that for just the engineering or just the design, which would be super helpful at that point for a lot of our projects.
So with that being said, at one point there was talk of the potential of like swapping this funding with the Department of Transportation. Is that still a thing or not?
I see that Bernadette is here. She had some of those conversations with ODOT, and she'll probably be able to explain it better than I can.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Bernadette Graham-Hudson. I'm the Wildlife Division Administrator here at ODFW. And yeah, we've been having those conversations with ODOT, and I think conceptually they are open to that, where we could swap the lottery bond funds with their general funds, which would give us more flexibility. But it, and this is where it gets a little technical. There's some tax law that relates to related parties. So we couldn't just provide the money to ODOT and have them spend it. It would have to go to a third party. So we could pass it to ODOT, and they would then have to use it to pay a contractor for something, or grant it out to someone else. So it becomes pretty complicated. And the more we dig into the details, the more it seems less likely to be a good option. So I would say the door is not completely closed, but we really are trying to put an emphasis on finding some projects that could use the funding directly, I would say.
Yeah, it's really attractive to do that, because then we can really focus on top priority projects, rather than like, oh, this one matches it, which is great, but we might be able to really help, like for instance, the Subtle Lake project. If we had that flexibility, we can help them get not to the finish line, but at least where they're looking at it. And so I know there's a lot of different issues, but if you're able to make something like that happen, it would really be great. So I appreciate you looking at it.
Yeah, we'll continue those conversations, but I think we want to also pursue other projects, because I'm becoming more and more skeptical that we'll be able to make it work.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for trying. All right, well, Rachel, is that what you pretty much had to tell us?
What I've got?
Our update?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, that gets us to hearing about some of these projects. Thanks for that report. That was very helpful. I've been involved in this, and now I understand it even better. So thanks for that. Does anybody have any questions for Rachel or Bernadette on these issues? Okay, well, if not, then we'll move ahead. We have Tim Gresseth, who's going to tell us about the I-5 exit project at Mount Ashland, which is one of the two that we are going to consider today. So, Tim, are you ready to tee that up for us?
Ready as I'll ever be. Yeah, very good. Thanks, Jessica. Jessica's going to run the PowerPoint here for me. I appreciate that. I had a little difficulty utilizing Teams. I'm just not familiar enough with it, and trying to connect or display PowerPoint presentation I wasn't able to get done. But gamely, Jessica's jumped in here to help me. Yes, we're here to talk about this Mount Ashland exit project, entitled An Adaptive Plan to Improve Wildlife Passage Under I-5. And what you'll know is that it does include a monitoring component, but we're not requesting funding for that. We're pursuing funding for the monitoring element of this project from other sources, including from Oregon Wildlife Foundation and other private donors, to see if we can pull that together. Because we do feel like monitoring is an important component, especially we want to better understand sort of the presence of various wildlife species in the area. Also want to be able to look at how if and as this is constructed, there's two sides to this, and the idea would be to monitor through construction with an interim period to assess use of what we had built, and then utilize that information to potentially make changes to the other half of this construction project. So we're going to continue to pursue monitoring funds for this. Southern Oregon University has been a fantastic partner, especially for the Mariposa Preserve project, and generally speaking, wildlife monitoring within that 14-mile corridor of interest between Ashland and the California border. Okay, Jessica, let's go to the next slide. Just a quick update, I think, for folks to understand kind of where things are at with the Southern Oregon Wildlife Crossing Coalition. We did complete conceptual design for 8 different crossing locations, including the Mount Ashland exit in November 2022. We went through 2 rounds of applications to the Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program with Federal Highway Administration. We're successful in the second go about. Funding was awarded in December of last year, and immediately frozen as we entered the new one. So The most recent information, though, is that funding is now unfrozen, and ODOT and Federal Highway Administration are pursuing an intergovernmental agreement to allow for the transfer of the funds and for engineering and design work to begin anew with Oregon Department of Transportation. We don't have a construction start date yet. I think the general tone and thoughts among SOWCC membership is that if we can move up the timeline for construction, we're going to try to do that. Try to get it constructed sooner than later if we can get the design and engineering in hand and feel like we're ready to start. Okay, next slide. Just as a reminder, this is the wildlife eco collision map for that 14-mile corridor. Where you see 11 deer on that graphic is roughly speaking where the Mount Ashland exit is. Okay, next slide. So the crossing locations that were identified through the mitigation analysis and then conceptual designs were created for 8 sites. These are all the priority sites that the Southern Oregon Wildlife Crossing Coalition is focused on. As you know, the Mariposa Preserve Site 7 is the one that we have obtained funding for construction of overcrossing in that location. And you'll see just north of that, Site 4 is the Mount Ashland exit. And then there are other sites, of course, there are 8 total sites, some more or less appropriate for either an underpass or an overpass. I-5 in this area is a bit of a challenge because the lanes are so far apart. So anything that would be constructed is going to have a fair distance to it. So that's one of the bigger challenges with trying to find suitable places for undercrossing and overcrossing construction. Okay, next slide. So why are we doing this? Why are we up to this? So one of the things that the Klamath-Siskiyou National Monument was actually created in part because of the biodiversity of this region of the state. It's really a remarkable place. So you have a national monument, and right through the middle of the national monument runs a major interstate highway. 17 to 18,000 cars and trucks per day pass up, up and through this corridor, making it an effectively permanent or almost impassable barrier for wildlife movement. There are, of course, wildlife that do get on interstate that cross successfully, and then there are a fair number that don't. But I think the bigger challenge is trying to create connectivity for that rich biodiversity, and to allow them to be able to move, various species to be able to move in and around safely and around I-5. So that's what this is all about. Okay, next slide. So the Mount Ashland exits are, our focus is habitat permeability throughout the 14-mile section of I-5 that we're focused on here. What the subject of this project is an infrastructure retrofit at the Mount Ashland exit. So next slide. So here's to give you a sense of kind of what that looks like. It's got some property ownership shown here as well, and kind of that aqua blue box that you're seeing is the location of where the project would be constructed on both sides of that underpass road. Okay, next slide. So what do we know about this? Part of the reason it was selected as a priority is because it was already getting wildlife use. So there are black-tailed deer that use this every day. We think that there's an opportunity to grow the number of species. Certainly more deer use is good, but we'd like to see more species utilizing this place for passage underneath I-5. And so Our plan, as I mentioned previously at the outset, so our plan involves doing some pre-construction monitoring, sort of understand wildlife presence and use around this area. And then ultimately our goal is to create a bench, about an 8-foot wide pathway that would, be easier for wildlife to use to pass underneath I-5, and then to create some screening to provide both a visual and somewhat of an auditory barrier from passing vehicles, traffic, and prying eyes from people who might be in the area. There is an ODOT facility that is nearby this. That's part of the reason we know as much as we do about how many deer are using it, because they come right through the ODOT yard to get underneath the I-5 underneath I-5 at this location. So creating a bench and then screening that bench from the road with some combination of vegetation, logs, and boulders is the plan. And there is no suggestion or no intent to use fencing as any part of this project. We're just going to take advantage of what's already existing and make it better for wildlife use. Okay, next. So this kind of gives you a kind of a rough approximation of what that's going to look like. So the what you can see along there is kind of a representation of what that bench, where that bench would be located on both sides ultimately. So this is showing just the one side, but our construction plan is for both sides to have a bench, and as well as some screening from the road. Okay, next. So there you go. There's a graphic representation, courtesy of ODOT, of some deer staring at us while they're getting ready to use the bench crossing. Feeling good about it, I think, is what I would say. All right, next. Any questions?
Tim, didn't we? I think the OCRF helped fund some of the preliminary evaluation of those.
That's correct. Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
That's just really nice to see how that's evolved. I was quite excited. I know that area well, and I was quite excited to see that was being looked at, and to see it now with this, and that concept of using an already existing underpass, which is so expensive, to have that and be able to beef it up to be effective, that's really great. That's a great strategy. So I really like the concept of it.
Yeah, all credit to OCRF for being an early supporter of the Southern Oregon Wildlife Crossing Coalition's work. You in fact did help underwrite the mitigation analysis and conceptual design report that we've now used to successfully get federal funding for the Mariposa Preserve overpass. And then of course, continuing to try to find ways to address some of the other priority crossings. So Ashland Exit is one of those. It's number 4. That's not a prioritized list. That's just a numerical ranking or numerical ordering. But OCRF support was critical in getting this whole thing launched, and SOWCC has really kind of continued to push this forward and garner the right amount of attention from the right supporters in order to raise additional funds, but also to get it across the finish line for some funding for Mariposa Preserve. And I will also tip my hat to Oregon Department of Transportation. This region has been great to work with. They were on early, and they've been supportive throughout. So really easy to work with, and they seemingly want this as much as we do, which is a really nice thing.
Well, that's great. That the OCRF has now been around long enough that we're getting a track record of things like this, and that's a part of what we're going to talk about at the end of the meeting, our outreach public outreach thing. And this is a great story. It's great. We were there at the beginning. We helped fund that. Now we're putting it on the ground. That just shows the utility of this committee and what the great work it's done. So that's all good. Liza Jane, you had your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Tim, for this presentation. Can you go back one slide? Jessica, can you? Yeah. This is a total curiosity question, but what prevents deer that are going under there from bopping down on the road partway through?
Nothing. Currently, nothing. They're very the deer that are utilizing on a regular basis are pretty habituated to a pathway. You could see a game trail underneath, along the slope of that berm, and so they do, of course, get onto the road occasionally. And what is good is that this road is not frequently used, and so there's certainly the risk of wildlife vehicle collisions in this particular location is relatively low. The traffic speeds are low, and then just the amount of traffic you see on this road it's more seasonal, of course, but on a regular basis is relatively low. So this is a pretty good spot for wildlife to be able to make their way under I-5 already. We're just trying to make it better, even.
Better, yeah. That's cool. Thank you.
And one thing I would note about this discussion about the monies that were available, I can tell you from conversations among the various partners and coalitions that Oregon Wildlife Foundation is involved with, that there was some reluctance to put in for these funds because of the least perspective or potential of a swap. And so I think there was some hesitancy on the part of some wildlife crossing proponents and coalitions to go after these dollars. SOWCC wasn't one of those, but some others that are interested in seeing more wildlife, safe passage for wildlife. I think we're hoping to see the swap, which would have, been able to advance more of these various projects, which are in many cases are just through phase 1 going into phase 2, which is where we need that design and engineering support. So I think that given that that you're going to put the call out again, I would expect you're going to see more applications from some of the coalition members that are out there for projects that don't require, kind of this kind of full scale plan set sort of design and engineering.
Thanks for that, Tim. Thanks for the presentation. This idea of using existing low use underpasses is really attractive. If you can figure out ways to make it really compatible for wildlife, because it's the huge expense to punch one of those things through. And if it's already there, man, that would be a game changer to expand that in several places. So that's a great concept. Well, great. That was very gratifying to see that you progressed to this point. And what we're going to do is move on to the next presentation, and then we as a committee will ultimately make a decision on these. So again, is there anybody that has any questions for Tim before we move on to the next presentation? I don't see any. Okay, great.
Okay,
great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to a bit of a different type of crossing. This is at the Cackler Marsh, and we have Graham Evans Peters from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Are you amongst us here and ready to present?
I sure am. Can you see my screen all right?
I can't. I don't see it on mine.
I have it.
So you guys have it.
Looks
Well,
good,
that's-
Graham.
I can see it.
Okay, well, I don't have it, but that's fine. Go ahead. I'll listen.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Graham Evans Peters. I'm the refuge manager at Basket Slough and Ankeny National Wildlife Refuges. Yeah, we're really excited about this work and just appreciate the opportunity and appreciate your consideration. So the Calquer Marsh Aquatic Passage Restoration Project is the second phase of a three-phased effort at Basket Slough to restore or basically replumb the whole refuge by removing 5 passage barriers, restoring about 5 miles of naturalized stream channel and its floodplain, and filling over 3 miles of channelized ditch. And this proposal specifically is for removing the second passage barrier and installing a bridge. I like this aerial taken this fall to start us off because it shows the pre and post project work. If you can see my cursor here, this red line is upstream of where we've been working, and you can still see a channelized ditch there. Downstream, this blue line is the meandering naturalized stream channel that we restored. And then that bridge that we're going to talk about here in a minute is going to go somewhere down here. I'll just stop and pause for a second. It sounds like a couple of folks can't see. Is there anything technically I can do about that, or you want me to just carry on?
I am not sure why, but maybe we're on the other side of the Cascades or something, because I can't see it. Liza Jane?
I can't see it either.
Yeah.
Are you folks on
I
the
can-
desktop application or are you on an internet browser?
The browser.
Internet browser.
Browser.
And which browser are you using? Are you using Chrome or
Chrome.
Chrome?
Yeah.
Safari.
Hmm.
But I
Man.
couldn't see your cursor, but I've got your screen up, so.
Okay.
I-
And I am
Now I'm
presenting
wondering,
off of,
Carl, if it has to do with if you click on change your view on the top right side of your screen. Have you tried that, Carl? In red?
I have.
There is does it give you, because there is also one that says the speaker view, there's a larger focus and content.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that could do it for you.
I tried it. Yeah, that didn't work. That's all right. I'm following it. And I looked at the proposal pretty close, so a lot of this stuff I think was in that.
I can't see
Okay.
it either, but I'm okay with just proceeding.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to pass along the PowerPoint after the fact, so folks can take a look that way. This image here helps illustrate the broader Basket Slough stream restoration objective. Looking at the whole 2,644 acre refuge, prior to it being acquired in 1965, the Basket Slough stream channel had already been channelized, cleared of all riparian vegetation, and the wetlands were drained to facilitate agriculture. So fast forward to the 1990s, and the refuge restored seasonal wetlands by creating 5 earthen berms that dam the stream in those locations. And these wetlands host great native dominated plant communities, but looking at them today, migratory bird habitat doesn't have to be mutually exclusive of other aquatic species in a functional stream. So our first phase of this stream restoration work was completed in 2021 with the most downstream of those wetland impoundments. It's a 100-acre unit called Dusky Marsh, and now we're continuing to work our way incrementally upstream. So this is the second phase, Calquer Marsh. It was mostly completed last summer. This picture shows that linear channelized ditch flowing through the marsh pre-construction. The berm and the water control structure are in the foreground. Construction included completely filling that ditch. And then some of the stakes or flags that you can see here is the alignment of that new meandering stream channel. This is a snippet from the plan set. Again, all this work was completed last year as far as the grading and earthwork goes. It's a 200-acre unit where it is the largest phase, and it restored about 1.4 miles of stream channel, filled in the 1 mile ditch, and there's about 60 acres of floodplain reconnection associated with that stream. It's within the PWCA Willamette Valley R27. It's the Basket Butte Conservation Opportunity Area, and it's intended to benefit many conservation strategy species that I'll mention in just a minute. These plans probably aren't very clear at all at this scale or this level, but essentially to retain that wetland habitat, we had to build new off-channel berms, which is this line and this line, and now we have a managed emergent marsh wetland on the north and south side of the stream channel. The meandering line running through here is the restored stream channel, and everything in between those berms, that 60 acres, is this dynamic floodplain that's connected to the channel much of the wet season. Also, downstream of the plan set, you can kind of see the 2021 project with this meandering stream running through here and another stream that feeds into it. One of the really rewarding, fulfilling parts of this project for me, it was accomplished by a team of refuge operators from August through mid-October. There were 27 refuge staff from 11 different states, from Hawaii to Louisiana, that conducted 2-week details to help us get all this work done. We used all service-owned heavy equipment and moved about 60,000 cubic yards of dirt, which is like 4,000 to 5,000 dump truck loads for perspective. We installed over 400 logs in the stream. All those logs came off the refuge. They were part of Oregon white oak conservation work, removing Doug fir. And we planted over 50,000 native riparian trees along that 1.4 miles of stream channel. This collective work project has been a really big investment by the Fish and Wildlife Service and the refuge system, but also it's been highly leveraged. You know, by doing all the work ourselves, using our equipment, we have saved, you know, couple $1 million. The $1 million that we did spend last summer covered everything from permitting to staff time, fuel, seed, trees, erosion control, construction management. And then the bridge is our last cost, and that figure comes from our engineered design, and we're actually holding a pre-bid site visit tomorrow with potential contractors. Picture shows a bit of the restored stream channel before fall rains came. We do have 1 or 2 more phases, and we're hoping to remove the rest of the barriers to get to that 5-mile mark, result in much improved aquatic system for fish, beavers, all sorts of native fish and wildlife, without compromising the high quality managed wetland habitat that we have out there now. And that was one of the reasons for the refuge establishment, for wintering sanctuary for dusky geese and migratory birds. Our hope is to have all of this work done by 2030. Okay, so getting into the species benefits, fish and aquatic species will be the primary beneficiaries during high flows in winter, like coho and Chinook salmon, steelhead, Oregon chub, lamprey species. But then this is a pretty, it's perennial stream, but it drastically dries out during the summer and low flow periods. And the bridge is intended to benefit more terrestrial species other parts of the year, like beaver, red-legged frog, black-necked stilt, dusky geese, pond turtles, and many more. Some of the pictures here, there's already some cool success stories. The picture on the right is Alex Farron from ODFW sampling fish last winter in our 2021 restored stream channel, that first reach of stream. And that's a juvenile coho. We caught multiple juvenile coho in the restored stream. Beaver that was taken in the restored stream channel, they moved in, I would say, too early and started eating some of our plantings. But that's the cost of doing business. And here, honing in a little bit more specifically on what we're talking about today. This is the bridge aspect of in the grant funding. Picture right here is of the water control structure and the segment of berm that will be removed. And this right here is the end of the line for any fish or aquatic organism that's moving up Basket Slough. This is where they bonk their nose on that big ugly water control structure. It's a 48-inch corrugated metal pipe culvert with a water control structure on the end, situated right in the middle of the channelized ditch. If you could see that staff gauge there, that water is about 8 feet deep right there. And that's what's going to get ripped out and replaced.
So that's the part that our funding would go for primarily?
Yes, and I will focus the next 3 slides specifically on that. I just felt that the background was important enough to give you the breadth and the depth of the overall objective here. So yes, from a funding perspective, this is probably the most important slide you'll look at. The design of the bridge is deliberately intended to meet the project's goal of maximizing process and function, while also, trying to maximize the performance life of the infrastructure and reduce the overall cost. We did look at a number of other things like box culverts and squash culverts, and just felt like, trying to restore the historic conditions to the extent possible. Those things didn't quite meet our objectives. So the bottom elevation of the bridge is 4 feet above the 100-year flood water surface elevation. And at low flow, it's 10 feet from the bottom of the bridge. So during the dry season, I think large animals like deer and elk can easily move freely through that bridge. It's 60 feet long, which is 14% longer than the 1.5 times bankful width. All this is intended to, maximize unrestricted peak flows, allow woody debris accumulation, pool riffle development, beaver dams, channel migration, all those things that we hope to see. And really beavers, we put a lot of wood in the stream to kind of kickstart fluvial process, but beavers will ultimately be what kind of dictates how this thing functions and operates in time. And once that riparian forest grows up. The bridge is 18 feet wide, and that is to continue to allow farm access and vehicle access, transport and equipment, refuge equipment. We have a cooperative farming program on the refuge to provide food for geese, and we need to maintain that program. This berm acts as kind of an internal thoroughfare on the refuge. It's also really important for public use and for visitors. Our wetland berms are the primary trails that the public uses to come and observe wetland dependent wildlife outside of the sanctuary season and to take pictures. We get about 120,000 visitors annually. And so, yeah, the bridge is a sheet piling bridge with most likely a gravel top. It's got a guardrail for safe pedestrian use. Yeah, I think that hits on it. This is just another view of it, looking from the top down. That notch in the berm will be about 4,000 cubic yards of fill. Believe it or not, though, a lot of that fill is going to be used to bring the stream elevation up. The channelized ditch is much lower or a deeper cut than the stream needs to be, and we want to maximize that stream's connectivity to its floodplain. Another elevation just showing how high the bridge kind of sits above the water level in that 100-year flood elevation. And last, a 3D image showing the berm after it's notched. It'll have 6-to-1 side slopes, pretty gentle side slopes to allow movement of all sorts of critters, aquatic organisms at high flow, and more terrestrial at low flow. Well, that's all I have, and happy to take questions.
Well, Graham, that was great. Very well thought out presentation. And it sounds like a pretty complex situation you're dealing with there, and the benefits are going to be quite large for the refuge. It seems you're going to have a whole bunch of different habitats all together there. So you should have a significant increase in your diversity. And I like the way you've designed it so that the hydrogeomorphologic processes can kind of go where they want to go. That's a really nice feature. So this looks like a really, really well thought out project.
Thank you.
Liza Jane?
Yes, thank you. That was a really good presentation, and you answered all my questions as you went along. Like I had a question and then you got to it. The only comment that was pretty cool, you planted that tree upside down and the root wads were all up there. That was pretty smart. So
I never knew equipment operators could be so artistic. And at first I was like, who told you to do that? But we had an osprey perching on it like 3 weeks later, so I couldn't really fault him for that. So
no, that was really good. So thank you. It looks like a great project.
well, I can say there was, a fair bit of head scratching and trepidation at first to try to completely unravel something that had only been done, 30, 35 years ago. And that original wetland restoration was a big undertaking by the refuge too. But restoration ecology is, an evolving science. And I think if they had a second crack at it, a lot of folks wouldn't do it that way again. So we're just trying to, learn and have adaptive management.
Yep, every day.
Yep.
Jane?
All right, I guess this is the elephant in the room, but with all the goings on with the federal government, can we stipulate that if you are unable to do this project, that the money comes back? Or how do we make sure that it doesn't just go poof?
Yeah, I don't think I can control it going poof, but I definitely no, I think there's a lot of assurances that we have in place. We've already seen, like I said, we're having a pre-bid meeting tomorrow. When we submitted this contract, it definitely went through different approval levels than it would have in the past. It was held up by Department of Interior for 60 days. But it is moving forward. The funding source for it on our end is the Refuge Systems Deferred Maintenance Program. That funding program is, has a lot of bipartisan support. It's to address a backlog of infrastructure needs on refuges. I'm sure you're aware, like the Great American Outdoor Act, that was also approved in 2020 or 2021. That sort of stuff seems to have strong bipartisan support. So yeah, I never know though.
Yeah, it's the times we live in, modern times.
Yeah.
Riva, can our attorneys make sure to put something in the agreement that the money can't just disappear into the federal budget, that if this project can't be done?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about what's already in our grant template, and there is language that is probably similar to that, but we could look into making it a little bit stronger for this situation.
I think usually the funding doesn't really go out until it's like happening. Yeah. So.
Right. So we typically operate, this would be a reimbursement type agreement. So once the funds have been expended, work has been, they can show invoices and contractors send it our way, and then we reimburse the funds. So that's kind of how it works.
Well, that seems like that helps a lot then.
Yeah.
And I should have articulated that too. We did a lot, previous work was done in-house, but this is all going to be contracted to one contractor, turnkey project from start to finish. So yes, reimbursable, it'll be one expense.
Okay, good.
the OCRF is getting into bridge building. This would be, if we fund this, is our second bridge. Remember, we funded one down in near Medford on a to an island so that there was public access. And I can't remember the name of the reserve, but it was for a bridge. And I really like the idea that we got some things on the landscape that we can put you got to put OCRF in the concrete when you lay the bridge. So. Okay.
I was very pleased to hear about reaching out to counties next round, because our next and hopefully our final phase goes through a county road, and we've already had conversations with Polk County about that's currently a 60-inch culvert that we'd like to see replaced with a similar type bridge. So there will be a need down the road.
Great. Any other questions for Graham? Okay. Well, Graham, thank you very much. Nicely done. That's exciting. It makes me want to go check out this refuge. I've never been there, but makes me want to go see it. So great.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, great. Well, so now we need to have a discussion. What we decided to do here is first of all, to thank all of the folks that came and presented, and Rachel's tee up for this was really helpful, and we really appreciate her input. And we've all had an opportunity to review these applications, and now we've had these great presentations, and we'd like to move forward. And the answer is yes, Graham. Thank you very much. We need to make a decision, and basically to see, because again, we don't want to mess around with this. We want to get these funds moving. These are shovel, by the very definition, shovel-ready projects. So is there any discussion about these? Any concerns that arose when you heard about these projects that would make you be reluctant to fund them? Yeah, I didn't either. Mark Labhart.
Well, it's just mainly a question if Rachel's still on, and staff has reviewed these. Is that correct, Reva? And is there? I actually haven't seen the write-up from staff that they have.
Yeah, we got staff reviews, and they were very, very positive.
Okay.
The only thing I do remember, there was one thing that could even be questioned, and it was the fact that that one of these did not have the permits quite yet, but it's like that's in the works, and that was the only thing that was anyway negative from the staff.
Thank you.
But
Carl, this might be a good opportunity for Rachel to provide her staff recommendation technical review to the group verbally. Okay. They've read it, but yeah, this might be a good time for that.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, both of these projects I think are worth advancing. They both meet all of the criteria for the lottery bond revenue. The two concerns that we had with the I-5 Mount Ashland exit project were that they had originally proposed to use some of the funding for monitoring, but we approached them about that. They know that that's not an eligible expense, so they're going to fund that monitoring work through other funds. And then they don't currently have project approvals in place or permits in place, but plans are in place for the Oregon Department of Transportation to complete those clearances and obtain those necessary permits. Since the work is going to be completed by ODOT, that should be relatively straightforward. And then the Cackler Marsh project is ready to go. I mean, they're literally shovel ready. So I don't have any objections to funding these two projects. I think they're good projects. I think they fit the criteria.
Rachel, thanks for the work you've done pulling all this together. I mean, it really helps us assess these, and also that you're out there beating the bushes to find appropriate projects. Reva, did you just see that from Moret? she lost something. I still see Marette. Marette, can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I've got no visuals except for me.
Yeah, well, we
We can see you.
We see you.
I was gonna get out and come back in.
Yeah,
You could try that, Marette. That might help.
Okay.
We can see you just fine.
What we have you here, rather than potential losing you, Marette?
Okay.
Let's not do that yet. Let's move ahead,
All
because
right.
then we would lose our quorum if for some reason you couldn't get back in.
Okay.
So let's, if you don't mind, let's just hang on here. Okay, so Reva, thanks for reminding me about the Rachel's staff recommendation. So any other comments? I don't see any.
Not in just another vote of confidence. I can tell the amount of detail and meticulous research that it took for them to select these projects. I can tell that knowing that there is a need to get these funds out the door, and even those that they had to reject for not meeting the criteria, gives me a great deal of confidence in knowing that these two in particular are exactly what we need, and what those funds were designed for. So just one more pro in the list that has already been shared.
Thanks for that, Mauricio. And that goes to Rachel. That's Rachel's hard work. I'm really excited about the Ashland one, is because again, we're part of the genesis of that, and it's wonderful to be able to continue that work. And I think it's a really innovative idea. And so, yeah, I'm very favorable of both of these. Any other discussion or comments?
Just a quick comment from me. I really love these two projects. I feel fortunate to be able to support them. And although they may not be gigantically visual, big splash of a scene publicly, I think the more projects we do, we can use that in our story. The more success we have, we'll get more money. It will all build on it. And, 5 million is not enough, but if we spread that out and do good work and get our name out there, we have a good story of success. And I'm excited to see that build.
Thank you, Liza Jane. That's a great segue in what we'll be talking about after the break. So yeah, I appreciate those thoughts. And just the whole wildlife crossing concept, the more people see that that's even a thing, that it's doable, that the more support you're going to get. I mean, I don't think a lot of people occurs to them that you can do something about it instead of just always constantly looking out for deer or frogs if you live in Portland. It's great to get it out there. So that was what I'm hoping, that some of this can be publicized and the Harborton Frog Project, not the Harborton one, the whatever that slough is, I can never remember it. But anyway, getting that out there, showing those pictures of the frogs going through is a really great thing. Well, Reva, did you have? I think what we were going to do is have different opportunities to approve these separately. So, did you have a draft motion for the first?
I sure do. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and share right now. Hope everyone can see that.
Got it. Okay, so we have a draft motion there. If you take a look at that, and if anyone's willing to make a motion.
I'd like to.
Great.
I move to approve the Oregon Wildlife Foundation Adaptive Plan to Improve Wildlife Passage under Interstate 5 project, totaling $274,500 in expenditure from the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund's Wildlife Crossing Lottery bonds.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mauricio. All right, all in favor? I can see people's hands. We got a quorum and it passes. You know, this is great stuff. It really is, man. This is wonderful to be able to do this. And honestly, looking at the price for that, I mean, it's a bargain to get an actual passage project done. Those things are multiple millions of dollars often. So this is really a great step. Okay, so we have approved the I-5 interstate crossing one. So Reva, can you put up the second proposed motion?
Mhm.
Anyone here willing to move this one forward?
I will move that we approve the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Cackler Marsh Aquatic Passage Restoration Project totaling $300,000 in an expenditure from Oregon Conservation and Recreation Funds, Wildlife Crossing Lottery Revenue Funds.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Marat. All in favor? All right, I see 5 hands. Very nice. Fantastic. Mark Labhart?
Congratulations, but I do have a question for Reva. Now that we've given that they're going to be able to expend this money with the commission's approval, how much will be left? What do we have left to allocate after, assuming all 3 of these have passed, the frog one and these 2?
So it was going to be 3.8 million, but now I believe since it's a little bit less for that,
I just did the
I-5
math.
one. Thanks, Rachel. Go ahead with
It's
it.
$3,930,500.
Will be left.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Good job, guys.
Yeah, it is great. Thank you all. I mean, it's a big deal, you know, that a lot went into this, you guys. A lot of behind the scenes things. Reva did a lot of stuff pulling all this together. We have been and then today we've been waiting for it to become a reality, and it finally happens today, which is really great. It's just a great thing. It's just a really gratifying thing. So it's really wonderful to know that stuff's going on. But it also points out for you folks working on this, we don't want to leave any of this money on the table. If we'll keep doing what Rachel is doing, looking around the state, getting this out there again, but I still don't want to give up on that opportunity of making this money a little bit more flexible. It would just be a shame to leave, especially in these times, to leave any of this on the table. So in your regions, where everybody's at, if there's some project that I know, Liza Jane, there's some up in your area.
Yeah, definitely.
And if there's any way that we can get these funds deployed, that'll be great. Okay.
We met, I think, last week and selected our site. So we're just wrapping up the feasibility study.
Oh,
So we're moving.
That's good.
Carl, Andrea wants to come in.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate something that Rachel talked about. With the minimal time available for spending these funds, a great opportunity is to look into projects that are replacing culverts, which a lot of our partners and agencies are doing, and expanding those culverts to have a capacity to also include wildlife instead of just water passing through. And that's a great opportunity to try to get in and change those engineering specs a bit to allow wildlife passage. And so a lot of times when we think about barriers, we're thinking about bridges or underpasses, but culvert replacements, if we can get into some of those in those key priority wildlife connectivity areas, I think that's a great opportunity for the shorter timeline. Thanks.
That's a really good point, Andrea. Rachel, it sounds like you've been thinking about, I don't know if Rachel's still with us, but you were thinking about those kinds of projects where, we're thinking of a wildlife crossing as something under a road, but a culvert's under a road. And there is a much more opportunity for wildlife than just a pipe. So is that something you've been looking at and considering?
Absolutely. I think about this every day. This is part and parcel of the work that I do for ODFW. So Andrea is correct. A lot of these culvert replacement projects are looking specifically to facilitate either the passage of water or to remove barriers for fish. But if we can invest money in making them a little bit bigger, oftentimes that opens them up to a much greater diversity of wildlife species as well. Most wildlife won't move through an inundated culvert. They don't like to get their feet wet. But with our renewed fish passage statutes that require 1.5 times active channel width, if we can just make that a little bit bigger, oftentimes that means that most of the year we have dry shoulders on either side of a water body that allow all sorts of wildlife to go through. And if we can invest enough to make a culvert replacement into, instead of a culvert, a bridge, or instead of a 54-inch culvert, a 6-inch culvert, or sorry, a 6-foot culvert, then all of a sudden we start opening up the possibility for things like deer to go through. And so if we have situations where culvert replacements have already been targeted, if we can get in and work with them to try to figure out, can we give you the money that's necessary to make this that little bit bigger, then we're not only benefiting fish passage or the conveyance of water, flood reduction risk, but then we're also allowing wildlife to use those culverts as well.
Great. Well, Rachel, it sounds like you're the right one to have out there beating the bushes and thinking about this stuff. So we appreciate it. We appreciate your efforts to get us to the point you did.
Question, Rachel. Would you need support in trying to make that a more concerted effort in reaching folks with that kind of projects? Or do you think that you have all the help you need in order to reach all those folks?
I think outreach assistance is always appreciated. We can reach out to as many contacts as we have within the agency, both with the partners that we work with directly, as well as our fish passage staff on the fish division side. But we're never going to reach everybody. So the more connections that we're making externally, I think the better.
I'm wondering, Carl, we are working on communication efforts, and there are some parallel communication efforts that's maybe pertaining to this kind of thing. Maybe not, with what we're doing with the folks that are going to be speaking with us later on today, but maybe there's some things that we could do around unlikely. I know nothing about this, but I'm imagining that the networks that maybe you are speaking about, Rachel, that maybe are not as easy to reach. There are also some dendrites of ours that maybe we've reached either through past applicants and or folks that have access or have had access to OCRF funds. And so maybe there's something that we can do in trying to make that a little bit more of a focused effort, especially considering the shorter timeline. So maybe that's something that we can bring about into conversation later on.
That's a great thought. That really is. I've got a phone call that I have got to take. Riva, can you do a public comment?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, and by the way, thank you, Jim, for joining. I just saw you join us. Thanks so much. So we're gonna go ahead and move into public comment if there are any members of the public that wanted to provide comment. However, I am not seeing any. So we can go ahead and close public comment for today.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Well, I appreciate you letting me know. It's past.
And the next thing we have on our agenda for today is actually a 5-minute break. So because Chair Winter just stepped out, I think this is a perfect time for us all to take a quick break. Let's be back at 2:30 if that works for everybody. So just about a 5-6 minute break. See you all very shortly. right, folks, thanks for coming back. I think we have almost everyone back from the break. Let's see, are we missing anybody? Maybe Jane? I think we're missing Jane Hartline. Oh, she's right there. So I think we can get started on our next agenda item. Oh, I see Chair Wenner just joined us. I will let him go ahead and introduce our next agenda item.
Okay, great. So this is a really important place we find ourselves here. We have been working with Quinn Thomas, getting a communication strategy put together. And we really need to hear from them, and then it's really important that we get your all's input into this. So this is a really important point that we're at. I think Haley is going to lead this. Is that right, Haley?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Carl. So
yeah, why don't you just go ahead and take it away?
I'll dive right in. So hi, everyone. I've met most of you, but for those of you I haven't met previously, my name is Haley Swally. I am Director of Client Experience here at Quinn Thomas. We have been working with OCRF over the last handful of months to develop a marketing strategy. And most recently, we have been working with the team on a handful of key messages that will really help shape how we're talking about OCRF, kind of give us some similar language to be using, and then also build out a handful of key messages for each of the 4 key audiences we identified. So what you're going to see today has already been through a handful of rounds of revision, and we've already aligned on some of the specific language in here. I won't bore you with like going all the way through it, but what we are most excited to hear from each of you about is, does the tone generally feel right? Does the concept and the message being conveyed feel right here? Versus like individual language, because a lot of times when we're deploying this messaging, it's inherently going to have to be customized. Like, this is not typically going to be something that we are copying and pasting directly onto social media or a press release or something like that. Messaging can't really ever quite get 100%, copy ready. But really want to make sure we're on the right track, and this feels right to everyone. So today we're going to be reviewing 3 items. So the first is an elevator pitch, and then we'll be reviewing audience-specific taglines. So this is a tagline that we crafted for each individual audience, and then some audience messaging as well. And as we dive into each of these, I'll give you a little bit more background on what they are and how we're going to be using them. And please, I will, with each of these, I will read all of it, or on the audience-specific messaging, there's quite a lot of text, and I'm sure you all don't want to hear me talk for like the next 45 minutes. So I will read a portion of it and then leave it up on screen for a little bit for everyone to review. So give me just a second here. Can everyone see this okay?
Yeah, I've got it.
Looks good.
So
this
is our elevator pitch. So think about this as something that you're going to use if you are at a networking event, or maybe, sometimes I think about it as like you're at a bar and you run into someone and you want to explain who OCRF is and what it does. The idea is that it's pretty simple and straightforward. This is meant to explain OCRF to someone who has never had any engagement and no awareness at all. So what's most important for us to communicate is just who OCRF is and what it does. And here we really worked to create something that combines both the advancing the protection of fish and wildlife with the continued enjoyment of Oregon's outdoors, so that it really gets at what makes OCRF unique. So I'll just read this. OCRF is ODFW's unique grant program that advances the protection of the state's fish and wildlife and preserves the continued enjoyment of Oregon's outdoors while leaving a lasting legacy for future generations. The other thing I will just say too is I know sometimes you need to sit with these things and think about them for a little bit and maybe test it out using it on your own. So please know you can share feedback after this too.
Yeah, I like the conciseness of it. I already have a suggestion, and partly, protection is appropriate, but there's also, like, you might think of ODF and Tubby's law enforcement part as the protection part in some ways, and we're more enhancement, maybe is a better term, like there's a unique program that enhances the state's fish and wildlife populations. And it might be a better way to phrase that than that advances the protection, because the protection implies we're trying to improve the situation, and that's just my initial take looking at that.
Totally. And I'm trying to look at the chat while we're also talking. Mark, I see your comment about, like, did we leave out recreation? So the phrase that preserving the continued enjoyment of Oregon's outdoors, and then also legacy for future generations, is really meant to get at that piece. It's a lot to get in one sentence. I feel like me, Jessica, Mauricio, kind of a lot of us spent a lot of time rewriting just this part.
Yeah, I think that addresses the recreation part, because that's what we're trying to do, is get folks outdoors, enjoy the outdoors. So I think that covers
and it
that
may
well.
may be pertinent for us to also clarify that this is sort of like the general ideas. That's where we have specific audiences. So this is not something that you have to memorize for when you're in a cocktail party. But this is sort of like something that sort of like how we imagine this could convey the unique characterization of OCRF. And then once you see the rest of them, you can pick and choose what feels most appropriate for the person or the people that you might be talking to.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Mauricio. There is, just with the variety of audiences we're trying to communicate with, there is always going to be a situation where, maybe if you're talking to this grant applicant versus this grant applicant, different type of language is going to work best. So there is some stuff throughout this so that you can kind of like mix and match and really meet the context of the situation. Andrea, I saw you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just had a question that relates to what you just said about different audiences. Is that why you chose to use protection or enhancement over the term conservation?
So we do have a little bit down in some of our policymaker messaging that there's a little bit of a difference, so you can pick and choose. No, we use conservation throughout, but I think just here we were trying to keep it super, super simple.
Thanks.
Great question. Awesome. So next I will get into the audience specific messaging and what I've been thinking about. The audience specific messaging is like, this is the bulk of what's actually going to be used, like in social media, fact sheets, things like that. One thing to remember with this is there is so much information that we could include here, right? But if we include more than about like 6 key supporting messages or so, it becomes so unwieldy that when I have worked with clients on messaging in the past, it ends up being something that to be honest, I don't know if they ever looked at it again because it's just not something that you can easily refer to. So the objective here is that we have, for each of these audiences, we have applicants, we have 2 donor audiences. So we have hunters and anglers, and then recreationists and conservationists. And then our 4th one is a policymakers audience. For each of these, we have their own individual tagline, a sort of like one key thing we want them to remember that's also sort of a call to action, and then a couple of supporting messages that we feel like are the most powerful things to be sharing with each audience. So for applicants, our tagline is empower your vision, apply for funding with OCRF to bring your conservation and recreation projects to life, protect Oregon's natural treasures, and inspire outdoor exploration for all. And then Mauricio, you'll see we made some changes, incorporating some of the feedback that you provided in the last version about just like, let's just straightforward tell people what we're doing instead of, and like I said, get to the point more. So thank you for that. And I'll leave this up here for everyone to review.
I guess the only one here that gives me any heartburn is the last one, just because our unrestricted grants, unfortunately, at this point, are not particularly growing. That is a little bit just the current situation in the legislature.
Yeah,
makes that not so likely.
Is it? So, Carl, what would you recommend changing this to for an applicant audience? Because we do have some policymaker messaging that speaks to just like we need this funding, basically.
Yeah, well, you could use this to say, we used to have great unrestricted grants, but we don't anymore. It's yeah, so this is a little bit misleading in that we're facing a situation like, for instance, we're going, in the best of situations, we're going from $4 million a biennium to $1.5 million in a biennium. So I don't think we can talk about our ability to provide unrestricted grants as growing. You could say we have the ability to provide unrestricted grants, but it's not necessarily growing.
Okay. We can rework that.
Yeah, that's just unfortunately the way the cookie's crumbling currently.
Yeah. Liza and Jane, I know you both have your hands raised. I'm not sure who raised first.
Liza,
Liza, do you want to go?
Sure. This is for all of our applicants, is that correct?
Yes, we did customize this a little bit towards diverse and underserved, just knowing that that is such an important audience for OCRF to be getting in front of. And it needed sort of a more unique touch.
Yeah, great. What I'm struggling a little bit with is it doesn't, from my 4 grant cycles, this list is not where I'm seeing us spend a lot of our money. It would be great if we did, but I'm feeling like we spend a lot on research for specific species, and so this doesn't look like what we've been funding in the past. The majority of what I've seen us fund is really species specific and a lot about conservation, and like this looks more, I don't know, maybe I'm asking the rest of our committee, does this align for you?
I see what you're saying, Liza Jane. I think it does, because we've, in terms of dollars, it's not as much, but in terms of like impact, like something that we've given people of color outdoors, for them is a really big deal. Whereas we've given more money to like a wildlife crossing project, but that was a part of a multi-million-dollar project. And so I think I think this is not that inaccurate.
If
great conservation with sea otters,
And if you don't mind, Carl, I think the intention isn't necessarily to create an accurate portrayal of what we are, but to see whom we're speaking with. So in for that first bullet is what we're hoping to do is organizations like People of Color Outdoors and the Alaka Alliance and Green Lens to see like, oh, if those folks could get money, then maybe I can as well. It's not certainly to create a comprehensive. And I imagine, for instance, if we were speaking to organizations that are in the research and conservation, we could create a set of 3 other examples that align with who those are in terms of scale and magnitude and maybe in field of research. And then you just need to replace those 3 lines, and the objective is really so that all those other organizations that haven't been invited or have not been seen as part of as a OCRF portfolio to see themselves as someone who could apply. So this is who we are, but like, hey, someone like you got some grants, maybe you should apply too.
Yeah,
I like I like that. It just, and I could have a twisted lean on this. Is seems like we've funded a lot of research in a broad term, and I like this. I'm happy to see us broaden. I've been, how do we help people understand that's not all that we do? So, but I also want to be inclusive of everything. But Mauricio, that helps me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's like this is forward looking, basically. Jane, did you want to jump in?
I do. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, this is extremely people-centric. And I think that an important part of our mission is taking care of all those species that don't get funding. That was part of how this whole committee came about, was that there wasn't funding for the Oregon strategy species, the conservation strategy species. And even like the third one, it's like, these are projects that matter to you. There's nothing in this about we fund projects that really are important to the conservation of implementation of the conservation strategy and species at risk and so forth. This is all about just people.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's who we are.
Jane, can we, I think there's some messaging in the next 3 audiences that is really going to speak to that.
Except the applicants are really important. If applicants look at this and they go, oh, that's what they do. Well, I don't see myself here. If you think about a lot of the projects that we do, this doesn't really even speak to them. And we want to see those projects.
Jessica, do you want to?
Yeah, Jane, I appreciate that. Can you speak a little bit more to that point 3 and how where it's missing that? And like,
well, it's about what matters to your community. It's not about what matters to the world. I mean, it's not about what matters to nature. It's not about what matters to, to conservation. It's just what matters to people.
So is maybe if this one were to be reworked to put the messaging of like that at-risk species and, that conservation component at the front end with the example then of the types of community-based projects that could also be there, is that what you're looking for? Is like it, and
that
then
would
like,
be better.
Okay.
That would be better. I mean, I do think that the Oregon Conservation Strategy is something that people are familiar with and that a lot of people are, want to see happen. That's why this was created.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear too, like in this messaging and in these short supporting points, we'll always like let's say this was on a fact sheet that went out to applicants. And
Mhm.
it would be married with the state wildlife action plan, right? We would say, hey, this is the guiding force, right? It's part of the application. So like, just because the messaging here is unmarried, don't think that this wouldn't be in combination there. So I think that that'll still hold a lot of weight and still carry that thread. But I do hear your point of maybe having one of these points have a little bit more emphasis on the species level first to really kind of thread that needle of saying like, hey, when I'm talking, I want to be focusing on species because that's what I believe this community or this group or this applicant group will be interested in. And so here's the talking point I want for them. And it's going to have that at the forefront with a little bit more adaptation at the end of like what that means for them. So that's just, I appreciate the perspective because I read that and I originally, like I immediately with at-risk species go to the state wildlife action plan, former conservation strategy, and I start making those connections. But if that's unclear, then we can bring that forward more.
Okay, I would appreciate that.
My take is this conversation is really great for Quinn Thomas to hear because you're seeing the kind of the dichotomy, and the OCRF does a lot of stuff, and it's hard to articulate that. We all know it when we see it, but it's hard to articulate it. And so you're hearing these perspectives that give you, I think, better insight into what we're trying to be. I think so. It's useful in that way. Mauricio.
Thank you. And I'm trying, and I totally hear you, Jane, and I'm grappling with a couple of paradoxes here. So I'm wondering, and to that third bullet again, I'm wondering if we maybe would try to appeal to the priorities of those folks that really care about nature by themselves, because ultimately, so on the one hand, we are speaking to people, and we want those people to apply, and we want those people to know that what they care about, like taking care of nature, conservation issues, are things that we also care about. And so maybe there is a way to create a bridge that doesn't sound too aspirational, because aspirational also feels a little bit intangible and maybe a little bit insincere. But at the same time, that also elevates the notion that we are not just about people, but we care deeply about what happens to the Oregon habitats and the wildlife that lives within them. So maybe there is something that could be found in that intersection, is what I'm saying. Like, I hear you, Jane.
Great. Andrea?
I understand both points. And I'm wondering if, just to put a pin in it, of perhaps the examples provided of birdwatching events to pollinator gardens. And I know it says habitat restoration, but a lot of your projects do span much more and have a far greater impact than some of the examples provided here. So even if you expanded the list of examples, I know you don't want to make it too long, but you just talked about bridges that are going to impact populations in Oregon. And so I understand communities relate to birdwatching events and pollinator gardens. Totally get that. I think that's great. But I think just habitat restoration doesn't encompass the enormity of some of your projects and the greater impact on species in the landscape.
That's a really good point. Liza?
Yeah, if that third bullet point, if you started that sentence with the second part after the comma, so it starts,
really
OCRF supports projects that address threats to at-risk species. The fact that that's with and help Oregon enjoy the great outdoors, that's all good. But if that could be the first part, and then we fund projects that also matter to your community, maybe it works better for me.
Awesome. Jane?
Yeah, I agree. I just think that, we've never really funded a bird watching event. Maybe citizen science. you know, I think if you're only going to have 3 examples, make them more important.
Jane, we have funded a bird watching event.
All right.
With, it was an organization in Portland.
Okay.
But we have, yeah, but it's not a major focus.
Yeah, like wildlife crossings would be a great example of something that's very significant that we funded. You know, research. I don't know. I just think there could be examples that don't sound so fluffy.
Yeah, definitely. We can massage that a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Reva?
Yeah, my only thought here that might help is touching on the fact that we're trying to fund projects that are right at that intersection between conservation and recreation. So projects that combine elements of both. Not exactly sure how to work that in, but that seems to be kind of missing because it's an important thing of what we're trying to hit on.
Reva, I would agree that I think I would disagree that the projects we fund have to be at that intersection. We do fund a fair amount of projects that really are not people-centric, that are research or habitat restoration or, you know, protect or species in other ways. And I don't want to stop that. I don't want to discourage people from sending in those kinds of proposals.
That's true. We fund pure conservation projects. Yeah, so I guess maybe don't add that.
So because I was just thinking about that comment, Reva, and I was like, it could be like combine conservation and recreation in that first sentence, but if we leave it just as it is, like bring your conservation and recreation projects to life, it encompasses projects that overlap, it encompasses one and the other. Do you feel okay about that?
Yeah, I think you've listed, and I think that's fine. And you don't have to, I mean, it almost becomes self-evident that if you got something that overlaps, that's really attractive. I mean, that when you have something that's really making an impact on wildlife, but at the same time, you're engaging people in the process, that's a really attractive OCRF project. You know, but that's implied by that. You don't have to spell it out necessarily that's what we're looking for. But if you're saying we do conservation, recreation, and community engagement, well, heck, if you got one that does all 3, that's a pretty sweet deal. That's just one. So, Mauricio?
Thank you. So I think, so I have a question and a curiosity, and this would be maybe for the Queen Thomas team, because I'm wondering if we maybe are getting stuck in something that could have a little bit more malleability. So for instance, I saw the first bullet not as these are the 3 examples that we're going to use, but these are 3 examples of organizations that we could use depending on whom we are talking to, similar to what Lisa Jane, the conversation we're having with Lisa Jane later on. Like, say, for instance, we're talking with folks that are very much into insects protection, then maybe we can talk about the Hermes Society and somebody else, and the whole objective is for them to see themselves in organizations of the same kind. So that would be one question, if, you know, the malleability of some of this messaging. And the second is that it seems to me that we also have to, for our purposes, have a little bit of a more clear definition. Like just what Jane surfaced with Reva. Is it at the intersection of recreation and conservation? Is it conservation and recreation with some preference around those that carry intersectionality between the two? Or is it just unique in the sense that it brings folks that maybe couldn't find sources of funding elsewhere, and they can find it here at OCRF for X, Y, or Z reason? And what are those reasons that they come to us rather than all these other places? And I feel that maybe in the answers to those identity questions, could help us move. I wouldn't change what we've already created, but maybe give us a little bit more light into how those could be presented to the people that maybe we want to have an impact when we tell these stories.
Yeah. So I will say I would think about this as being somewhat malleable. These are just the projects that, you know, we heard of, we saw within materials. And when we think about this through the lens of trying to reach a diverse and underserved audience, seem to align. When we think about wanting to show those folks, there's no reason why it has to be these ones, right? Like if we are talking to more of a research-based conservation group, it can absolutely be swapped out. And then I would just love, I think Mauricio raises a really good point around the, like, is it one or the other? Is it the intersection? I will say across the board, like what I have heard is that that intersection is really what we're trying to convey here, because while yes, it is also one or the other, that's something we have heard throughout this project. The intersection is a lot of times what makes it the most unique, if that makes sense. It's not that it's the only thing, but that it is what makes it the most unique. Jessica, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I agree with that, Haley, on that uniqueness. I think how I look into these too is that, to Mauricio's point of like, there's some malleability in some of these supporting messages, but does everyone see all applicants fitting into that tagline, right? Does the researcher doing conservation work fit into that tagline and see themselves in that? And you're like, okay, what's my call to action? It's to apply for funding because I can fit in here. I see myself there. The same, and that should be the same for any small community group as well that's doing, you know, outdoor education. They need to see themselves in that as well. So I think where I focus in a lot is making sure that those messages, people can see themselves in that, and that everyone can see that that is applicable, and that also then ties into the overarching message of like, what is OCRF? It's super unique because it allows all three of these components of conservation, recreation, and kind of like outdoor enjoyment for all. Like that's super interesting and makes it different than any of our other grant programs. So just wanted to put that kind of in too, of like making sure that the call to action is there, and do people feel that and see that in these messages?
One other thing I'll just add that we were thinking about quite a bit as we were developing this is that we have to be really conscious of, like, of course it's not actually a competition, but in a sense, when we're talking to applicants, when we're talking to donors, there is a bit of a competition for attention, and also in the case of donors, for funds. So applicants have a limited time to apply. Who is going to be most aligned with them? Donors, you know, they may be considering, should I donate to OCRF or should I donate to another conservation organization that's really well known locally? One thing we were trying to be conscious of is just making sure that we're standing out from amongst that, because we see the logo soup on the OCRF website, and we see that there's all these organizations that are doing such awesome work, but what spot can OCRF occupy to really connect?
I think you have noted how we are unique, and that uniqueness is a real value to us. And unfortunately, that uniqueness also makes it harder to articulate.
I know. That's one thing. Yeah, I'll say that to all of you here. This is such a great discussion, and it is kind of a hard thing to articulate, right? Because we're doing a lot. This messaging is very hard work, doing a lot.
Haley, just to give you the insight, we've been struggling with this kind of languaging and how do we convey this from the start. We all know, I think, down in our guts what it is, but it's not easy to put it in words that convey the kind of things we do. So it's really valuable for you guys just to hear this, so you get a better sense of what the organization is really about. So yeah, I think this is a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Did Jim Hammett show up?
What was that?
I have Jim Hammett signed in, who was not here earlier. Jim, are you with us? Huh. Well, that's good if you showed up. That's great.
Um,
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Carl, I am. I just had my mic muted.
Oh, well, great, Jim. Thanks. Appreciate you coming. Thank you very much.
Okay.
all right. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to talk a little bit about our hunters and anglers audience. So this one, you'll see we leaned a little bit more into the idea of legacy, of working locally to address risk to at-risk species, and a little bit more on that like fish, wildlife, and habitats piece here. You'll also see some language down towards the bottom where we talk a little bit about how Oregon's state budget doesn't have any funding to protect non-game species. One thing I will say is that is some really specific language that we toyed around with a lot because a lot of folks are not going to necessarily understand like biodiversity that is a little bit more open-ended. Some other conservation related concepts. We really wanted this to be super simple to understand how it impacts them. So our tagline is support Oregon's future. And our main message is donate to OCRF to protect fish, wildlife, and habitats and ensure that Oregonians can enjoy the outdoors for generations to come.
Can you make that any bigger, Haley?
I can. Unfortunately, it gets a little bit cut off, so I can scroll down. I'll leave this here for a little bit, and then I'll scroll down in a moment.
Okay.
I like that a lot, what you just said, and in part because of the legacy idea. I mean, that's important too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the hunting and angling public that want their children and their grandchildren to be able to enjoy that. I think if that is who your target audience is, that's important.
Yeah. With this one, jump right in, Isa.
Is there any way to not use the word protect?
Yep, we can swap that out. Is there something that you feel like might be a better fit?
Again, enhance.
Enhance.
Like the hunting and anglers understand what conservation is.
Yeah.
Protect implies, oh, I'm not going to be able to go hunt. but conservation might, or enhance. That's where that protect piece gets in the way a little bit, because like a protect means, oh, are we going to fund the game wardens? Is that what we're doing? And so you have to be careful using that word. I think enhancement or conservation might be better.
I think when you're speaking to hunters and anglers, you're absolutely right that you don't want to say protect you, and I don't want to even say conserve. I think enhance is the perfect word for hunters and anglers.
And rural people, our culture is gonna bristle up over protect and come up with all their own stuff, what that means, and it's not positive. So
yeah, agreed.
I have a question if we can talk about that third bullet of outsized impact.
Yeah.
Is at least maybe to me, is an awkward phrase.
Yeah, we can work on that a little bit. This had originally started as trying to find a way to show how public donations enable leveraging of state funds. And I think it made a little bit more sense when we had some of that in here. But yeah, we can find a different phrase.
And
so this is kind of geared towards like the folks that would be donating on the website,
right?
By hunting and fishing license, yeah.
And if with that very specific customer in mind, in terms of buying the hunter and angler licenses, you might even consider wording about this is. So why a lot of those entities provide funding is because they know a lot of conservation work at ODFW is done from the license and fees they're paying. And having the message that those funds are helping with conservation, but this adds additional funding for this work helps that argument that some feel like they're funding Conservation Oregon, where this is like, hey, we're, donate to this and we're expanding on that. And so I think the outsized impact to be massaged a bit to sort of acknowledge that those funds, but that this is a helping and building upon that.
Yeah. I like that.
I feel like the third one, if I'm asking for somebody for money, I don't want to point at them and say, because you're the problem. You are messing up, so you should pay us to fix it. So you can keep messing up. That's how I read it.
You're talking about the second sentence there?
The third bullet there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I will say, throughout this process, we did do quite a bit of research on like what types of messages are going to resonate with this crowd. And we do need to offer a little bit of an explanation as to why this is so important right now. And like human infrastructure expansion, you'll see in a couple of places we have extreme weather or climate change, just depending on the audience. And like pollution also, pollution is something that we have heard from the group really resonates with this audience, because they know that is causing conservation issues. So
how about we could say 100 the Oregon species are threatened due to loss of habitat. I mean, people understand.
Yeah.
And then they know the loss of habitat is from human infrastructure expansion, but you don't have to just smash them in the face with it. Everyone knows.
I completely agree. And habitat is the key issue with game species decline. So I think that they would very much see the importance of habitat loss.
Jessica?
No, I agree, Carl. I think that habitat loss is key. And I know that we speak a lot to habitat loss and due to, changes in landscape use, just to keep it more broad, right? Because it's not just infrastructure, it's changes in use types. But I think just leaving this habitat loss speaks to it.
Yeah. Awesome. There's a little bit more down here for hunters and anglers. One thing we settled on is just really wanting to make it clear cut and simple that there is not funding for this type of work, and that's why OCRF is so important. And then some language around leveraging state general funds and filling that gap as well.
I like the second part of that. I think that's very important to point out. One of the problems, it's even just the term non-game. It's just sort of not a great term. And I don't know everyone, because of course these are hunters and anglers, so they're very interested in game. Mm-hmm. And if the implication is, we're going to spend all this money on non-game, that's different. That might be not so great. So I don't know that I would put non-game in there. I would point out that the Oregon budget is inadequate to protect all our wildlife species. Mm-hmm. That's is without using the word non-game. It's just hunters and anglers appreciate all wildlife, but they really appreciate the game species.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to you want to just be inclusive in that and not start separating too much out, at least for this audience. And there are different audiences that would be that would be effective for. The bird watchers, the people that aren't so focused on the game species. But I wouldn't, in something reaching out to hunters and anglers, I don't know that I'd use non-game. We don't have adequate funding for wildlife, period.
Now that you've said that out loud, Carl, I wish I would have got that earlier. We played around with quite a lot of different words to swap in here. What about just sticking to the idea of conserving habitats?
Yeah. Jim Hammett has his hand up.
Actually, hold on.
went out of order. I got Mark Labhart first. Sorry.
Hey, thanks,
Mark.
Thanks, Carl. I'm back up. You can have an outsized impact with Andrea's comment there. I think maybe I didn't understand what outsized impact meant either. I would propose maybe just a little bit different wording, something like you can make a powerful difference in protecting the fish and wildlife habitats that make our state truly unique, period, and then go on. Instead of saying you can make an outsized impact, but you can make a powerful difference in protecting fish and wildlife habitats that make our state truly unique. That says it for me versus that first sentence, that the outsized impact. So just thought I'd offer that.
I like it. Jim Ham.
Well, I had two things. Number one, every hunter and angler knows about the issue with mule deer habitat and mule deer in Oregon. And if there's some way you could work in mule deer in a habitat way or otherwise, I think that would attract and be attractive to hunters and anglers. And the other thing is, I'm not sure whether or not you do this, but every hunter and angler has an opportunity to contract to donate to OCRF when they buy their license. And I think that should be emphasized or at least mentioned somewhere in here because I think that is maybe an untapped resource. Those are just two comments. You can take them for what they're worth.
I 100% agree on that, Jim. That's sort of what I think this should be focused at. And that is a tapped resource. We've got $250,000 of biennium through this mechanism. And that's starting to be real money, especially today. And so with it, I think we're trying to enhance that. And that's what I view this as, communicating to that population that's going to go on, buy their license and go, oh, OCRF, I heard about that. And they'll check it. And even with our minimal output or minimal communication, people are checking it. They like it. They like Oregon Conservation and Recreation because they're giving us funds. Liza Jane?
I really like your comments, Jim. And what I hear from hunters and fishermen all the time is we believe they're the world's greatest conservationists. That's how they identify themselves. And so I think approaching this messaging is acknowledging that and that they're necessary in doing our work. Because again, these aren't, for the most part, maybe this part isn't about getting applicants, but it is about getting donations. And they want to keep doing what they're doing, but they see themselves as key to conservation in the groups they join, Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, all of it. That's why they join and that's what they're doing. So we want them to donate to us, and we need to recognize that that's how they view themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some good ways we can work that into that third bullet and also resolve the issue with outsized.
I totally agree with Liza Jane. I think that's a really cool message that, that the state's hunters and anglers have been leaders in conservation. And here is a mechanism by which you can easily help fund the projects that we know you care about. So I think that, it's not a bad idea to say this is a mechanism. This is a way that you can do that. And we know it's something you already care about.
Hope you guys are taking good notes. You got some great comments and great. I think this should really help you all with the insight these folks have into the populations we're trying to reach.
Oh, definitely. I have an AI note taker turned on, and Alexis had to hop off a little bit ago, but we did have another member of our team on taking notes as well.
Great.
So the next audience I want to talk a little bit about, and this messaging you'll see is somewhat similar to the hunters and anglers because the action we're asking them to take is somewhat similar, and so some of the same information is in here, but this is for our conservationist and recreationist audience. This is Support Oregon's Future, donate to protect fish, wildlife, and habitats, and ensure that Argonians can enjoy the outdoors for generations to come. And then we talk a little bit about being a part of our state's conservation legacy, a little bit more on this idea, Carl, that we talked about going way back about the biodiversity crisis. You'll start to see this rise to the top, but it's, or not rise to the top, it's kind of like underpinning a lot of our messaging. And then we, of course, any feedback that was provided on the earlier section, we will apply here too, as it relates to things like outsized, the third and fourth bullet point, we can revise that.
See, to this, again, non-game is still not a great word, but to this audience, they know that non-game is way more appropriate. It's too bad not another word for it.
What was the word that Rachel used earlier, Carl? I was just trying to remember that. Didn't she use something else?
For non-game?
Yeah.
Typically, the other term usually used is diverse species.
That would work for this audience.
Yeah.
I think actually that's a great word for this audience.
I think, though, that saying that Oregon's budget doesn't include funding to protect diverse species,
you could say
may be troubling.
Oregon's budget does not include funding to protect all of our wildlife species.
Yeah.
I think that's a very accurate statement.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess Andrea, what I meant, like it could be used elsewhere in here.
Right.
Sometimes,
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I liked what you're saying there about filling in the gap, and yeah, I liked it. That's a good way to put it.
Mark?
You to death, Carl, but I'm going to weigh in on that one. So I think by saying, however, Oregon's budget does not include funding, I think that is, we do include funding. We have non-game habitat biologists. Maybe instead of saying, because somebody's going to read that and go, well, how come we're got habitat biologists and non-game biologists? Maybe put something in there that says, Oregon's budget severely restricts or limits or something like that. But I think we're going to get caught if we say does not include, it does an ultimate, because somebody's going to find something that says, well, wait a minute, there's some funding here. We're trying to say, yeah, but it's nothing. It's budget dust. You know, we're trying to say that. We're not, but somebody's going to catch us on does not include, because I think it does include some funding for that.
I was just thinking about the word underfunded.
There we go. Perfect word.
Or
severely underfunded or something like that.
No, I like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, severely underfunded. Oregon's budget is severely underfunded, and then I'll figure it. That's my job to figure out the rest of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
because I do want to make sure we're conveying the severity of the gap without scaring people, of course.
Andrea Hansen, you had your hand up?
This is, if there's still conversation on that bullet, I can wait, but mine's about the next bullet about OCRF's grantees are already achieving Oregon's conservation goals. I think perhaps instead of achieving, making strides towards, because I don't think we've achieved our conservation goals, but OCRF is really helping us to make strides towards reaching those conservation goals.
Yeah, agreed. We haven't achieved it yet. We'll let you know when we do.
Okay.
Striving to reach Oregon's conservation goals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a great way to segue into the way that we've given. That's a nice way to start rather than just throw out there we've awarded that many $1 million of projects. I like kind of the sentiment that you have there, opening sentence, but we haven't achieved it yet.
What do we think? So one thing I was thinking about with this is that, anytime someone's making a donation, they want to hear about outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Is there something that maybe it's just language, maybe there's something else we could swap in? Because I do want to make sure that we're speaking to that. Just to really drive home just the impact of the organization.
Well, you could say Oregon's grantees are already helping to reach Oregon's conference. We're moving ahead.
Needle, yeah. Okay.
Oregon's grantees are already making progress towards Oregon's conservation goals, and we've given them this much money. Something like that, without implying that we've achieved anything yet. We're better off. We're $8 million better off than we were. But that's not the end game.
Yeah. Jessica?
Yeah, this could be to a point where it can get tied back to the State Wildlife Action Plan and the goals there, right? So like really making that connection. There are Oregon goals, but they're across all these different species and habitats. And so that might be a good place we could make that connection.
Definitely. Liza?
Are you looking, Haley, for maybe a from red-legged frogs to wildlife crossings or something,
Yeah, that could be.
I would like to see us, if we're not going to use the word non-game species, let's throw one in there. So
yeah, I think something like that, because that feels really tangible, right? Like
right.
we want. I know we were talking about not being too inspirational with the applicant messaging, but I think about that being true with donors too. Like I think about all the mailers you get, right? And it's like donate today to XYZ. And it's like something you can, hold on. There's a better way to explain this. People want to know that the environment right outside their front door, or the park that they go to, or the national forest that they go to, that's what's getting, like, something that they know, can see, touch, feel, experience is what's going to be impacted by this. So if we can find a way to incorporate some of that in here, I think it really helps it be powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beavers, like something.
Yeah.
Real that's kind of on both ends. I'm sorry?
Western pond turtles.
Yeah.
Pond turtles like turtles.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It is difficult to strike a balance because we want to have some of that, but some of the tangible really drives home the outcomes that we're supporting.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts here? Okay. So lastly, I will go on to our policymakers conversation or messaging, and this is has some more specific funding or more specific information around funding, benefiting constituents in your district. That's a lot of language that you're going to see here. Some other call outs. We really like the word safeguard here. Our team at Quinn Thomas has a AI powered audience research platform where we can look at data on, really any audience in the United States, but we pulled some data recently on Oregon state legislators, and the idea that some of the biggest values that they have include things like duty to community, accountability, things of that nature. So we really like aligning to that because we know that this is something that's so important to them. So I'll read this first, and then we can talk about some of the stuff that's further down in the supporting messages. But we have champion Oregon's future, support OCRF's funding to safeguard natural resources in your district, and provide your constituents with lasting opportunities to experience Oregon's great outdoors.
Yeah, once again, the safeguard part is like protect, and maybe is not the most accurate. Again, that's where enhance, because you get a timber guy on the coast and we're going to safeguard natural resources. That means we're not going to let you cut any trees. And while that might be a good idea, that's not necessarily the message we want to be given. So but we're going to enhance it. We're going to make it better. We're going to make the natural resources. I think that's better than to say safeguard, because safeguarding implies a protective role, and that's not really what we do.
Liza?
I didn't mean to have my hand raised, but I'm going to say something about the word protect. When I hear it, I think from who? From what? And generally that is you. And so that's the problem with that, is I know these species and habitats need protection, but that's how that word gets received. So especially when we're trying to ask people to support us and give us money, we don't want to point our finger at them because you're causing problems, or humans are, even though that's true.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. It's just we're all about making it better. It's all about enhancement, or some other word that says enhancement. Andrea Hansen.
A word that might trigger more positive and impactful things than natural resources could be something like healthy ecosystems, which encompass everything, and it also implies sort of, healthy water and healthy systems that does impact people. Since the last part of your sentence is specific to sort of Oregon's great outdoors, but not necessarily to our reliance on healthy ecosystems. So just something to think about.
I like that. Thank you. I think someone else had their hand up. Was it Jim? Or was it Mauricio? Yeah.
Yeah, and can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And I apologize if this was brought up already. I was out for a moment, but maybe another way that we can bring about the same thing is the notion of building resilience. Because in resilience, then there is, of course, the idea of not protecting, not safeguarding, but knowing that there is a risk and that we are responding to a risk. And so we are sort of making our ecosystems more resilient. We're making make our ecosystems or habitats thrive. So we're using active language without making unnecessary implications, what I'm saying.
I like that. I also, just based on some of the audience research I've seen, I think that will resonate really well. It's language that lawmakers are familiar with.
And when you say safeguard healthy ecosystems or something like that, it is something that people feel comfortable jumping in on, whereas natural resources can be touchy, but everybody wants healthy ecosystems.
Definitely. Let me scroll down just a little bit so you can see the supporting messages a little bit better.
Yeah, I was looking at that top one, and that's not, again, that's not accurate, where the OCRF is funded primarily by public donations. It's the general funds that is our primary funding, and the public donations that we get through that website that's the gravy. So that's not accurate. I think what we should do is say that your constituents support us so much that they supplement what we're given by the state, but the state is really the key funder.
We can make sure that's updated.
Just so you know, like for instance, we got about $4 million to spend last biennium, and that was from the state, the legislature, and we raised $250,000 from hunters and anglers. So it's a big difference there. It's way more money comes from the state, but you can use the fact that we get support to point out that the public likes us enough. They're not only willing for taxpayer dollars to come to us, they're giving us money too.
like that. Some of the earlier notes on things like human infrastructure and expansion and just making sure to be not pointing the finger, we'll incorporate that here too.
Yeah.
I'm especially curious to get all of your feedback on that second to last bullet, the seeking unrestricted funding to close a critical gap in Oregon state budget.
I think that's a very good. But I'm just as long as they know what unrestricted funding means. I don't know that we have to say unrestricted. That implies we're just going to do crazy things with it. But the unrestricted is an important thing because everything we get is not everything. Many of the funds we've gotten have been earmarked for specific things, but that gets too complicated to explain that and why we're saying unrestricted funding. Unrestricted just sounds like, oh, give it to us and we'll go and spend it all over the place. But that's an accurate statement. OCRF is seeking funding to close a critical gap in Oregon state budget. That's very real. I'm not sure that unrestricted is the right word to use.
Jessica?
Yeah, I agree with you, Carl. And I'm curious what your thoughts are and if it started with something like OCRF has received water or drought, beaver related or funding related to these topics in it, which is appreciated, but in addition, this, funding without these types of restrictions and whatever term you want to use instead of that would be useful to fill this gap for other projects that are outside of that scope, right? So kind of increase the scope of the funding by not putting the sideboards on it of what it can be used for.
I like that.
Yeah, you can say that we have in the past we've received. Yeah, if this is the place to explain all that, is that we have, that seems to be more like a conversation when you get deeper into it. It seems like this is just saying, look, we need money. And at this level, it doesn't matter as long as we get some money. Then you can get more specific as you drill down to say, we need those unrestricted funds. But this may be not the right place to explain all that, of how we've got earmarked funds and unrestricted funds, and we really want the unrestricted funds. That seemed like more of a more subtle conversation. This is just a plea to say, look, the whole thing's underfunded. We need more money. And rather than get too picky about what that money's like.
Yeah, we can work on that. I spent a while brainstorming on that unrestricted because having worked with like tech startups, they talk about like patient capital and things like that, which is kind of a similar concept, but also no one knows what that means. There's got to be something else we can swap in there.
You guys understand what that is? I mean, for us, we got quite a bit of money that was for drought related things. And so we had to tie our applications to drought. Whereas we also got some money that we could spend it on whatever we wanted. And that whatever we wanted was way better. So that's what we mean by unrestricted, but that may not be the best thing. It's hard to know when to bring that point up. So you're learning a lot about those.
Can we use the term non-specific instead of restricted?
Yeah, I don't want us to sound like we're doing something not. Yeah, we just need, be honest, we need funding. It doesn't matter.
I think taking out unrestricted, it still reads fine.
Yeah.
Funding to close a critical gap. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I think our unrestricted is to some degree insider language that folks that already are part of the grant, community would get it. those who aren't.
Yeah, you'd have to sit down and explain it. When they buy on this and say, okay, this funding sounds great, then you can say, and what we really need is funding that we can fund all these different things rather than this little niche, you know. And it hasn't been, we've been able to cover a lot of bases with it, but yeah, that's a more nuanced conversation than trying to get it across in a few sound bites.
Yeah. And I like that too, because it is important to keep in mind that there's been so much changeover in the Oregon legislature in the last handful of years, that there are a lot of folks who are still relatively green.
Yeah.
Is it as simple as saying OCF is seeking continued funding to close the critical gap? Is it that simple?
Yeah.
Ongoing.
Ongoing, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure this is shared around afterwards, at least in its current form. Just know that all of this, I mean, it has been recorded. We do have notes, and we'll be working on some revisions. Other than the messaging, we have been hard at work behind the scenes on a handful of other aspects of this project, including a toolkit for grantees to share the news of their grants and just really spread the word about how important OCRF is to achieving their missions and the impact that they have. And then we are also just now in the last week or two getting started on success story packages. So we worked with Jessica a little bit to refine the scope of those so that the kind of case study basically that we will be developing is a little bit shorter, but we are able to do more of them. And that will include like a case study, some social media content, and we'll be selecting 2 for earned media outreach as well.
Along those lines, we just had a great example of that today. Tim, you worked with Tim Grasseth. You could get specific details from him. Many years ago, we funded a feasibility study for wildlife crossings in the Ashland area across I-5. So that was money we gave to a group that went and studied it. And today we agreed to fund to the tune of like $300,000, one of those wildlife crossings that they came up with our original funding. So that's a really nice story, I think, how we helped them do the legwork to pick where the crossing can go, and then here we have given them $300,000 to make it reality. That's a nice story.
Definitely. I didn't realize that when I was listening in earlier.
Yeah, that's what that was all about.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure this gets shared around and work on some revisions to this. Thank you so much for your input. It is so good to hear all of the conversation around this. Sometimes when we present messaging to clients, it is just crickets. And I actually really love that we get this amount of input in. It really it makes making revisions a lot easier.
Well, you should also, you got a good sense of how this committee works and why it's so successful. You have a lot of really smart people that think hard, and it's very important to them. And I think you got that sense, and helps you articulate what it is that we've had trouble articulating. So I think it's really valuable to have had this session. So thank you.
Definitely.
Okay, well, we look forward to hearing back from him. Does anybody else have any comments to make to Quinn Thomas where we're at? Okay, then. Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing back from you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time.
All right. Bye-bye. Wow, that was great. That was great. It's this is a great committee. I really like hearing what you guys think. So I think Riva, you had a few things kind of to wrap up with today.
I do. And Carl, if it's all right with you, could we go back to the minutes, the last item of business that we weren't able to do at the top of the meeting?
That's
Is that
right,
all
because
right with you?
yeah, thank you. You want to put that up there?
Sure thing. Just give me 1 second.
Jim, just so you know, I don't believe you were here for the wildlife crossing discussion, but we heard 2 really great wildlife crossing proposals, and we voted unanimously with a quorum to fund those 2. And
good, because I talked with Riva earlier, and now that I understand the whole issue with them, I told her I fully supported them. So, and I would have called in if I got the word from Riva that I was needed. But thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it was really good, and like I said, it's really cool that we funded part of the feasibility portion for the Ashland crossing, and here we are now being able to fund it. It's really a big deal. So
yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that connection, Carl. That's good.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. So Riva has a motion up. Because we didn't have a quorum, we weren't able to earlier on approve the minutes. So is someone willing to read that?
I'm happy to. I move to approve the April 1st, 2025 meeting minutes with a continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, this is Jim. I'll second it.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Another task completed. Passing the minutes. One of our major milestones every meeting. Okay, so Riva, you want to go through those the wrap up?
Yeah, I sure do. It's at the very end of the slide, so I hope I don't make you all seasick by doing this. There we go. So yeah, just a few things to wrap us up. So we had a pretty long and packed meeting today, so I don't want to take too much extra of everyone's time, but I do want to share that the spring 2025 RFP is going to be closing this Friday, just a few days away, and I am getting a ton of interest in this grant cycle, which is probably not a surprise. And there are already, I just checked this morning, 66 applications in there. I expect there to be more rolling in. Those are draft applications, so they haven't been fully submitted, but 66 folks are working on their applications as we speak. So quite a lot of interest in our spring grant cycle. Yeah, and just a reminder that the advisory committee review period will be middle of June through the middle of July is when you'll be, your due date for completing those reviews will be mid-July. Go ahead, Mark Labhart. I see your hand.
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to do it at the end. I have a comment at the end, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
And we have the advisory member follow-ups, so you can be reaching out to tech reviewers during this grant cycle. That's going to be scheduled for July 9th through 11th. I'll hold time on the tech reviewer schedules if you wanted to reach out during that time. If you have any questions as you're going through these reviews for this application cycle. And then we'll be having advisory committee recommendations for this cycle on July 29th. And that'll be our in-person meeting in Sisters, which I will talk about a little bit more in just a little bit. And Rachel has already gone over this really well at the top of the meeting, but about a request for interest phase 2 and the need for that, I just wanted to put out to the group and to touch on, Mauricio already brought up the the idea of extended outreach from the committee and what that could look like for our communication. So as Rachel said, we could definitely use help spreading the word. A tentative timeline might be to get this out as early as next week, the next week or so, and have it open for 60 days and have it closing on us in mid-July. So that's a tentative timeline, and I'll reach out with further help to spread the word for that request for interest for Wildlife Crossing Phase 2. All right, and last but not least, our upcoming meetings. So next meeting is June 3rd, and we're going to be having Tim Gress is coming back to talk about Defenders of Wildlife Project with Colin Reynolds. We're also going to be hearing from the Audible Bats Project, which is out at OSU Cascades, Sarah Rose. And then I also wanted to talk with the committee again about our in-person meeting. So it's going to be in Sisters Monday, Tuesday, July 28th through 29th. So July 28th will be the field trip. And Marette has been helping with planning that. So the field site visit, she's been working with her contact, Derek, with Trout Unlimited. And so she probably has a little bit more to share with the group. And then we plan to have a committee dinner that night, and then committee meeting the next day following. So Marette, did you want to kind of talk a little bit about what you've been planning for that site field trip visit and potentially coordinating meeting sites for what would work for the group on that day?
Sure. So,
okay, go ahead.
So one of our earliest projects that we funded through OCRF was with Trout Unlimited and Caldera Arts. And this was up at Blue Lake, which is a private nonprofit youth camp that has the headwaters of the Lake Creek system. And Lake Creek runs into the Metolius. This is one of the few, I think it's the only, considered the only recoverable sockeye salmon run in the state of Oregon. I think Wallowa Lake has had sockeye, but I'm not sure they were able to recover them. So that's an interesting place. It's private land mostly, and they worked, Derek has been great working with kids there and also in the Metolius Basin. So his proposal is that we come up to Caldera. He helps us get in. It's a gated place. We get a short spiel from the Caldera staff about what they do there with kids from Warm Springs, Portland, and Sisters, and then walking to the site and to Blue Lake, which is actually like a small version of Crater Lake. It's a volcanic caldera that is now filled with water. So it's an incredibly beautiful place. And then from there, going down to the Metolius to the lower parts of that watershed and looking at some stuff there. So I guess the main question has been, where is it going to be most convenient to meet? So people that are coming from Portland and Salem, you're going to be driving right by Subtle Lake. And maybe it makes sense to meet up at Subtle Lake. Riva and I had talked a little bit about meeting down at Sisters, but can't check into the hotel anyway at 1 o'clock or whenever we were talking about. So I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of where would it make most sense to meet. People could either bring brown bag lunches and hang out at Subtle Lake, and we meet up there somewhere. There's also I think a little cafe at Subtle Lake Resort that could also be a lunch spot for people that are coming over. So just trying to figure out the most efficient place for us to meet. And then Derek is also interested in how long do we want to spend up there. And I think we were talking about a total of a 3-hour field trip, basically getting us back to Sisters by 4 or 5. So any comments?
I'm coming from the south and I don't mind just driving right up there. I mean, if we meet in Sisters, I'm still going to have to drive up to Subtle Lake. So I'm fine with meeting up there.
Okay.
I was just doing the calculation of the drive time. I think whatever, it's about 3 hours. So would be fine for us too. Whatever makes the most sense. We can meet there or yeah.
Okay.
So you're thinking about meeting, say, at a little after noon and then have some lunch there, or is that kind of what you're thinking, Marat?
Yeah, I think so. We were gonna kind of leave everybody on their own about lunch, but people could either bring a brown bag, or I'll confirm that Subtle Lake has got something open. It's not cheap. It's like a $20 burger place, but you know, it's nice there, and I'm sure we could also just go hang out on the side of the lake if you'd like to brown bag it. But it would be a convenient place for us to meet, and then maybe possibly carpool a little bit to get into Caldera, because it's right there. It's just a mile or two away, but we'll have to go through a gate, so probably minimizing the number of cars might be helpful.
Marat, are we going to be anywhere near the Subtle Lake Wildlife Crossing area?
Yes, we are. And that was the other thought I had, is I know they've just, I'll send it out, but they had a bunch of media stuff this week that they finally reached one of their goals. And they did mention OCRF as a potential funder. So we could talk to Jeremy or somebody and see if they would do a quick show to us of one of the wildlife crossing areas. So I'm not sure where they all are, but yeah.
Even so, we kind of drove by it, so we all had an idea.
Yeah.
Because I suspect we're going to see an application from there sooner or later.
Well, I can check with Jeremy from who's been doing a lot of that stuff for Central Oregon.
I think we funded again some of the preliminary work up there.
Yeah, we did, and they actually gave us credit in the news stories that were out this week.
Right.
Okay, so it sounds like tentatively meeting up at Subtle Lake Lodge might be the best place, and then we can talk about what to do after that.
Sounds good. And Mark Labhart, I realized I forgot to get back to your question. So what was your question from earlier?
Just to come into I wanted to thank Carl for another great meeting, and to you guys did good work today. You spent some money on some really good projects, and to particularly thank Andrea. Welcome to the fray, if you will. It's great to have you. You've got a good background, and appreciate you being involved in OCRF and making the time for us. We're looking forward to working with you throughout the process. This is a great group of people, and you'll enjoy working with it. So,
thank you so much. This program is amazing, and I'm super excited to be here.
This was an ambitious meeting. Yeah, this was a very ambitious meeting, and Riva nailed it on the time. And she told me we can't do the little go around and talk to everybody thing, and we had to hit the ground running. And then she nailed it. So thanks for putting together a great agenda, Riva.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks everyone for spending the time today and doing great work. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, that was another good meeting. Thanks everyone for participating, and we can call it adjourned. And again, everyone remember that in-person meeting and really make an effort to get there. All right.
Excellent.
Great.
Have a great day.
See you.